Hey everyone, welcome to Town Hall Theater. We're so happy to have you here today. A couple quick housekeeping things. Please do silence your cell phones. We really want to give our full attention to our friends here on the stage. And the exit is where you came in, and right to my right. Also just wanted to make a few quick announcements. You might have noticed that Town Hall Theater is expanding. You can see right out that window. It's all very exciting, and we've already are running classes for all ages in the new center. We also have some performances happening upstairs in the Anderson studio. And soon, coming this summer, our Maloney Plaza will be open with an outdoor stage, space for food trucks, and weekly free arts programming thanks to a grant. And our grand opening celebration for all of this will be June 27th and 28th. We'll be announcing all those details on April 30th, so stay tuned and please come out. And I'd like to say a big thanks to Senator Hardy and everyone who came today to address these really important questions, and couldn't be more grateful for their leadership. And I'll turn it over to Ruth.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That is Lisa Mitchell, the executive director of this amazing, amazing institution. And I'm Senator Ruth Hardy. I'm one of your senators, and thank you all for coming. It means a lot to us to have such a big group of people. And Drew, I'm sorry, I forgot to say, start the live stream if you haven't already done it. Thank you. So this is being live streamed on MCTV and 3 other community access television stations across the state. So anybody who hasn't been able to make it here in person hopefully can be watching it now or watching the recording later. I want to start first by welcoming all of you and thanking you for coming to participate in our democracy. It's really important, especially now when our democracy is in peril, I think. And I first want to also acknowledge how stressful this situation is and how much anxiety everybody has right now about the unknowns. And we're gonna try to answer your questions and provide you with the information that we have now. It is an ever-changing situation, so things might change next week, and we can only do what we can right now. But we'll try to answer as many questions and provide you with as much information as possible. And we thank you for coming out even during a stressful situation. I wanna start now by thanking Lisa and the Town Hall Theater and their incredible staff for helping make this possible. Yeah, absolutely. They are pros. Lisa and Mary Longy, who's running around, and all the ushers who are here. I don't know everybody's name, but thank you to all of you who are here helping, and also to Zach, who is the box office manager. A couple weeks ago, I called Lisa and I was like, I'm thinking of doing this event with the Attorney General and maybe a couple other people. Would you be interested or able to host it? And I gave her the date, and she was at first a little reluctant, and then she called me back and she's like, absolutely, we'll host it for free. They are not charging us, we are public officials. And she and her staff have just really embraced it and done all of the details, the box office, so I'm incredibly grateful, so thank you, Lisa. And also, I want to thank, of course, our panelists for coming, and I will introduce them all in just a minute. And I also want to thank MCTV, who's up in the booth, live streaming this around the state. I really appreciate that. And I also want to talk about what this forum is and what it isn't. A number of people wanted it to be something different. They wanted it to be a protest or some kind of stand up against what's happening, and that's not what this is. You're welcome to do whatever you want afterwards, but right now this is a forum, a public forum, and it is a panel with your elected officials. There were other people who wanted other people to be involved, and we really wanted to keep it to your elected officials and 3 statewide officials who have been heavily involved in all of this work. And it's an opportunity to be here in community and to get some questions answered and to bring us together at this time that's stressful, and to make sure that you all know that your elected officials are engaged and doing something on your behalf. So that's what this forum is, and I hope that it's helpful to all of you. We are going to start with each of us providing a little bit of information about what we are doing as elected officials, and then we're going to do as much Q&A, questions and answers, as possible. Many people, we got over 40 questions submitted in advance, and my amazing husband, Jason Mattel, who's sitting in the corner over there, edited them and combined a lot of them. There were obviously a lot of questions about the same topics. So we'll start with those, and then we'll take questions from the audience if possible. So thank you for your patience and for your attention today. And I just want to introduce our panelists. First, we have Secretary of State Sarah Copeland Hanzas. Sarah has been our Secretary of State for 3 years, and I have worked with her closely. I was the chair of the Government Operations Committee that works on elections law, and Sarah and her team are just amazing defenders of your right to vote and our democracy. So it's really amazing to have Sarah here. And next we have Attorney General Charity Clark. Charity has been our Attorney General for 3 years. She is the first woman to be elected to Attorney General in the state of Vermont. And she is right now involved, and she'll tell you more about this, but involved in defending Vermont against some actions of the federal government, and is doing a fantastic job at that. And on the end, we have Mike Pieciak, our state treasurer. Mike has also been treasurer for 3 years. And you might remember Mike from the COVID press conferences. He's a data nerd, which is a good thing for a treasurer. And he is working and has been working for the last few months with a task force or committee or something. He'll tell you more about it, about how to protect our state financially from what's happening at the federal level, the tariffs, the cuts, et cetera. And he can tell you more about that, but it's really great to have Mike here as well.
Thank you.
So we also have Representative Robin Chai, who I'm going to call up in a little bit. She is the chair of this House Appropriations Committee, which is the money committee. Her committee has been working for months to put together the next budget for the state of Vermont, and she's going to talk to you a little bit about how her committee is helping to prepare for the actual and further potential budget cuts from the federal level. So she'll come up on stage in a little bit. So I just wanted to talk a little briefly about what the legislature is doing. I am, as I said, a senator. I serve on the Natural Resources Committee and the Senate Finance Committee. This is my 7th year in the Senate. And we have been really busy with a number of issues this session, most importantly, major restructuring and transformation of our education system, which I'm happy to have a forum about that at another time. That's not the topic today, but that's taking a lot of our attention. But we are also keeping our eye on the federal situation and doing what we can to protect Vermont and prepare for what might be happening. And I want to call out a couple things in that Attorney General has been deeply involved in this work, but we have done over the last 5 years a number of things to protect reproductive rights and gender-affirming healthcare in Vermont. And yes, and we did that proactively. Many of you, probably most of you, all of you in this room voted for the constitutional amendment for reproductive liberty, and we've done a number of bills, shield laws, to make sure that people are protected for their right to access this crucial health care in Vermont and to provide that crucial health care in Vermont. So we are doing an update to that to further strengthen our shield laws this session, and the Attorney General and I have worked closely on that. So that's one thing. We also are strengthening our protections for immigrants in Vermont. We have a number of bills working through the system right now that get at this in a number of ways, whether through housing, employment, sort of interactions with the federal government, and those are working their way through the legislative process right now. We're also working, doing a lot of resolutions, which aren't laws, but they are basically reaffirming our values and reaffirming our laws. I was the lead sponsor of a resolution reaffirming the rights and safety of transgender Vermonters. Transgender Americans were one of the first groups that our president targeted in an incredibly mean-spirited and horrible way. And here in Vermont, we've done a number of things over the last few years to protect people who are transgender, and we needed to reaffirm that to make sure that people knew that we in Vermont stand in sister and brotherhood with our transgender neighbors. We are also reaffirming our relationship and cooperation with Canada. Canada is super, super important to Vermont. Canada is our #1 trading partner, and the treasurer can talk a little bit more about this. We need to protect that relationship and reaffirm that Canada, we love you, and we don't want you to not come to Vermont and not trade with Vermont. And we're doing everything we can as our brave little state to protect, excuse me, that relationship. And then we are finally doing more to protect our budget, and Representative Shai will talk about that. But at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists and start with the Secretary of State and have them talk for about 5 minutes, y'all, okay? And then Robin will come up and talk for about 5 minutes, and then 5 minutes each. And then we'll go to questions. All right, thank you. Go ahead, Madam Secretary.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Senator Hardy, and thank you to Town Hall Theater for opening your doors and allowing this important discussion. If you appreciate being able to come and hear from your statewide leader, on your way out, make a donation to Town Hall Theater. I'm sure that they would appreciate it. So as your Secretary of State, I am laser focused on free, fair, and accessible elections. And the executive order that came out on March 25th, which tracks very closely to the SAVE Act, which has passed the United States House of Representatives, is a really blatant attack on our democracy and the function of our elections. The AG may talk some about the lawsuit pushing back against the executive order. It is, in my view of the Constitution, a pretty clearly a blatant disregard of the Constitution, which says that states shall determine the time, place, and manner of elections, and that only Congress can make laws and put certain parameters around that. And in the history of our country, Congress has been very careful and very judicious, and the states have been very steadfast in saying, we do elections, you do your thing, we will figure out how to make sure that elections are safe and accessible and secure. And that relationship has existed for a long time and has worked quite well. The SAVE Act is crossing a line into interference in how states conduct elections. But more importantly, I think to each and every one of us as individuals, it is putting a tremendous barrier between you and your right to vote, because it would require each and every person to show documentary proof of citizenship to their town or city clerk in order to get on the voter registration rolls. Now, if you're fortunate enough to travel internationally and you can afford the $180 or so to have a United States passport, then you're probably going to have a pretty easy path. But I think all of us can imagine our neighbors who've never traveled internationally and in fact rarely get to Burlington. They might not have a passport, okay? The fact of the matter is there is no one entity of federal government that facilitates its citizens being able to show documentary proof of citizenship. So you would need to have a certified copy of your birth certificate. And I'm sorry, if you have your original, possibly handwritten birth certificate, that's probably not going to pass muster. You'll need a fresh copy, certified birth certificate. And if your name is different now than it was when you were born, you would need to then show other documentation, official documentation of why your name was changed. Maybe you were adopted, maybe you changed your name when you got married. So that's going to put additional barriers in front of a lot of people who will have to find the time and bear the expense of gathering up that documentation. And I think the really nefarious part of this that has so many town and city clerks in Vermont uncomfortable and downright scared is that there are criminal penalties for registering someone to vote in the absence of that documentation. And that means that as a town clerk, even though you've lived next to Mrs. Jones for your entire life and you know that she was born here, you would have to say, no, I cannot register you to vote until you have a birth certificate and showing us why your name changed when you were married and a current government photo ID. To put that burden on our town and city clerks is really, it's outrageous. It has many of them thinking, gosh, I'm not even sure this is worth it anymore. Maybe I don't want to be a municipal clerk anymore. And as your chief elections officer, I can tell you that that would be a real detriment to our democracy, because the strength of elections in Vermont is that your town and city clerks are laser focused on your community, on making sure that elections are run fairly and safely, and in reporting those results to us so that everyone has faith that elections in Vermont are fair. So there's lots more that we could talk about with respect to the SAVE Act, but before I wrap, I just want to say, of course we don't want non-citizens voting, right? I mean, everybody understands that if you are an American citizen, you can participate in our democracy. If you are not yet a citizen, you're welcome to be here. We welcome you as a neighbor, but you can't vote. The Brennan Center for Justice has done a comprehensive study of non-citizen voting and has found that the rate of potential non-citizen voting is 0.0001%. So to put your clerks in potential criminal liability, to put each and every Vermonter in the position of needing to gather up that documentation and take time to go down to the town clerk's office and present it in person for that 0.001% possibility is frankly outrageous and unwise.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Secretary. And we're going to turn now to the Attorney General.
I want to reiterate Sarah's thanks to everyone for hosting this, especially you, Ruth. This is really wonderful for us to be able to speak directly to folks in Addison County, and for all of you for being here. And of course, I love seeing Sarah and Mike because I don't get to see them every day. You can't sugarcoat it. We are certainly living through dark and unsettling times here in the great state of Vermont and in our country. We have a president who has repeatedly violated norms and the Constitution. He's attacking universities, prestigious law firms, immigrants, our economy, weirdly. And it's hard not to see that the common thread of all of these violations is an attempt to consolidate power in himself, the president. And that is not what we do here in America. We believe in the rule of law, in the three branches of government. Yep. We believe in the three branches of government. We believe in state sovereignty, our sovereignty as Vermont. Because no man is a king. In fact, that's kind of part of our brand in America is we don't like kings. So when you elected me your Attorney General, you gave me the power and the responsibility to represent the state of Vermont in court to sue the Trump administration when they violate the Constitution and federal laws, and that is what I have done. Since January 20th, I have sued the Trump administration 9 times. Yeah. And I will continue to sue if the Constitution is violated or federal laws are violated. Bottom line, no one is above the law, not even President Trump. And I'm proud that because of the actions that my office has taken and my fellow Democratic attorneys general across the country, so far just Democrats, but I think someday Republicans will be forced to join us as well, we have had a big impact on some of the nefarious attempts by the Trump administration to change norms, to violate our rights, and to violate the Constitution. Right off the gate, the birthright citizenship ban has been blocked. The federal funding freeze has been blocked. The freeze of the NIH grants, which would have impacted the University of Vermont, was blocked. The plundering of Americans' data, the Treasury Department by Elon Musk and Doge, blocked. The illegal firing of federal employees at 18 different agencies was blocked, then stayed. Now we're duking it out in the Fourth Circuit. And we've sued to block the dismantling of the US Department of Education. We've sued to block the unlawful and sweeping voting restrictions, which Sarah was just talking about, that would keep unmarried women, deployed military veterans, and, you know, particularly, like Sarah said, low-income Vermonters from voting. And most recently, we sued to stop the dismantling of small federal agencies that support museums, minority-owned businesses, and of course, libraries. That one really gets me because in addition to being Attorney General, I also sit on my town's library board, and the library in my town is like the center of the whole town. So, don't come for libraries. So we are focusing on every single executive order and also every single action that the Trump administration is taking to ensure that it is legal and that it is constitutional. And when it isn't, we are taking steps. Sometimes we are not the correct party to sue. It's not the state, it's an individual or a nonprofit who is harmed. In those cases, we have joined, in many instances, what's called an amicus brief, a friend of the court brief, where we lay out Vermont's position. Like, we're not the plaintiff in this case, but here's how this situation impacts Vermont and Vermonters. And we've done that numerous times too. Here's a good time to say that if you are interested in keeping abreast of all of the lawsuits that we have brought and some of the other actions like friend of the court briefs, the guidances that we've put out, you can go to my website, ago.vermont.gov, and on the landing page, you will see an American flag, and if you click on it, you can go and we have a chart that will keep you updated on all of the work that we're doing in a chart form. If you're a chart person like I am, you can tell whose idea that was. You can access that. I know that many of you are concerned about, okay, thanks Attorney General Clark for all of your work, but what happens when the Trump administration violates those orders? Well, the good news is what we have found is that so far in our suits, the Trump administration has complied. Sometimes it takes them a couple days, like you know, a toddler who doesn't want to go to bed or doesn't want to do the thing. They don't comply right away, but eventually they do. We also, I'm grateful to say, it appears that Chief Justice Roberts of the United States Supreme Court is having none of it. And he, even before Trump was sworn in December, he put out his annual message that had a rebuke of people not following judges' orders. You can see the federal judges are not used to being disobeyed, and they do not like it. So I have been proven correct that that would happen, and I'm grateful that it is happening. I also want to point out that you know, it's individuals, it's the Trump administration, that's what we say, but it's individuals who are the ones appearing before a court, and it's individuals who are risking, you know, being criminally in contempt, losing their license, etc. So keep that in mind when you start to get worried about a disobedience with court orders. I also want to thank each of you. Many Vermonters have worked with our office in the work that we're doing, and that includes sending us information about something that you're experiencing or something you've observed. We talked to a lot of Vermonters who've lost their jobs, who are federal employees. We've talked to people who are in nonprofits. If we, are having, if we need help from outside of state government in getting a declaration to establish that Vermont is a party who can sue, people have been very helpful, and I want to thank you for that. I know that it's a scary time, and I want us to focus on the things we can control. We are a sovereign state with our own rights, and each of us has a role to play. I want to thank you also for the incredible outpouring of support and thanks that we have received from Vermonters. It has been spontaneous, and I was not expecting it, having worked in the office for 10 years. We have, we started out with one giant bulletin board full of thank you notes, thank you emails, little missives, and then it filled up, and now we have a second one that's almost full. And they are right when you walk in the office, everyone sees them as soon as they get to work in the morning, all of the thanks. And some of them are literally on, when I say thank you notes, I mean like the ones you get at the card store that say thank you on the front, and you flip it open. Like, it's so touching. So thank you for sending those. It really means a lot. I want to close here with a quote that former Attorney General and Chief Justice Jeffrey Amistoy reminded us of from Learned Hand, a former judge. That's his real name, Learned Hand. We all learn about him in law school. And he made a speech during World War II, and he said, "Liberty lies in the hearts of men and women," edit, "and other people. When it dies there, no constitution, no law, no court can even do much to help it. It is the liberty in our hearts that should continue and fight for our democracy. So exercise your right to speak up, to buy a banned book down the street, write an op-ed in your local paper, support the free press, organize your friends, volunteer for a campaign, fight for something you believe in, support your neighbors, buy from corporations who share your values, donate to local organizations like this one. And if you feel yourself getting tired, you're allowed to take a break. I was told that I should remind people of that. It's okay to take a break, rest, recharge. We are Vermonters. We weather storms together. We shovel out our neighbors' driveways together. We muck out our neighbors' flooded basements together. We fought for bodily autonomy. We fought for our own private healthcare decisions. We fought for civil unions and marriage equality. We welcomed our Afghan allies and Cambodian refugees as our neighbors. We speak our minds. We do what's best for each other and for our state. So do not despair. Our country is strong. Our democracy was built to weather moments like this one, and I know we will. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Attorney General. And now we're going to turn to Treasurer Pieciak. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ruth. And again, thank you, everybody, for being here. It's really an honor to be with you all. And it's really an honor to be able to serve with Charity and with Sarah and with Ruth and Robin and all the great folks that are at the state trying to do what's right for Vermonters, trying to do what's right for all of our shared values that we believe in. And that's regardless of party lines and ideologies. So thank you so much for all of your work, and thank you again for everybody being here today. I wondered if we could start with just a show of hands for some questions. We had a couple of other town halls that we participated in, and it was really poignant to hear from people and what they're experiencing. But I wonder how many people in this room, thinking back to November, are surprised by how bad the last 4 months are, even knowing how concerned you were. Show of hands. I'm in that group too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been unbelievable. Like, you have to give some creativity points, if nothing, but it's been unbelievable. How many people have had a friendship or somebody in your family that's been damaged because of this current political environment that we're living in? And how many people know someone personally that's been impacted over the last 4 months by a Trump policy? That's amazing. Anyone here, if they're willing to say, ever voted for Donald Trump? All right.
Somebody was ducking down behind their chair.
Well, my last question is, my emotion that I'm feeling now is anger. I don't know, are other people mad? Yeah, thank you. I'm getting too mad. So why am I mad? I mean, what is that about, you know? And I think this moment, you know, it's more than being Democrat or Republican. This moment is so much bigger than that ideology or those party differences. This moment is all about what's right and what's wrong. And when I say wrong, you know, I think of what Donald Trump has done over the last 4 months, and things are not wrong because they are policy failures. They are wrong because they are moral failures. You can see all the people that raised their hand that said they knew somebody that was impacted by his actions the last 4 months. And I should have, I mean, I don't think I needed to qualify that with negatively impacted, but I assume that's what it was. But think about all those people that have been impacted. Think about all those relationships that have been tarnished because of this person. It really makes you mad and angry. And you think about here in Vermont, what the impact has been and what it will continue to be. And when we set up this task force, we've been looking at what's the economic impact to the state of Vermont. And there are really 4 numbers that I like to go back to that I think tell the story really well about what we're dealing with. The first is that the state of Vermont, and Robin knows this, 37% of our budget is federally funded. So we have a $9 billion budget or so, but over $3 billion of that is coming from the federal government. And it's not coming to us to say, hey, here's some money, do with it what you please. These are programs that the federal government has told us we need to operate in partnership with the federal government. The most important of which is Medicaid, which provides critical health care to so many vulnerable Vermonters. And that's the one that's specifically on the chopping block for Republicans in Congress. So 37% of our budget from the federal government. The other thing to think about is that 1 in 5 Vermonters work for a nonprofit. 1 in 5 Vermonters. Nonprofits in Vermont contribute significantly to our economy, billions and billions of dollars, thousands and thousands of jobs. Put aside the economic benefits, they're doing good work in Vermont, changing the world. But 1 in 5 work for a nonprofit. If you add up all of the money that those nonprofits get from the federal government, it's over $600 million annually. So these nonprofits themselves get a lot of money directly from the federal government, including over 40 nonprofits here in Addison County that get over $30 million. And then when you look at their 990s, the forms they have to file that say, where's all your money coming from? What are your expenses? If you took away the federal grant, 68% of them would be at risk of not being able to pay their basic expenses as an organization. So 68% of nonprofits in Vermont are at risk if the federal funding goes away for those nonprofits. So that's a significant risk for our economy. The other one, which is a terrifyingly big number, but you know, it's what it is $1 billion. We estimate in our office that there'll be $1 billion of increased costs from the tariffs that Donald Trump has implemented. And when you think about the tariffs, it's interesting because there have been so many of them, and it's hard to even know what is in place right now. But when there was Liberation Day, where we had all of these, you know, tariffs that were reciprocal and whatnot, and the formula that was kind of whatever.
Random.
It all boils down to, at that moment in time, we had an effective tariff rate of like 27%. It was the highest tariff rate since 1904. That was like robber baron era. When he announced the pause, that provided us an effective tariff rate of like 18%. So most countries, all the countries still have a 10% tariff. That didn't go away. The Chinese tariff is 140-something%. There are steel tariffs and aluminum tariffs and automobile tariffs. So this is the highest that tariffs have been since 1934, which is when we were in the depths of the Great Depression, when Republicans in Congress with Herbert Hoover thought that they could work themselves out of a Great Depression by becoming isolationist in terms of trade. So we're still not in a good spot when it comes to tariffs, and in some ways it may even increase the amount. It might even increase that $1 billion a little bit because so much consumer goods come from China. So $1 billion in increased cost annually. Just to put that into perspective, I'm sure nobody appreciated their property tax bill last year, but if you add those property tax increases up, we collected about $200 million more in revenue as a state. So just think about that scale of what that will mean for individual consumers. And it's going to land on lower income working class people the hardest because it's essentially just a regressive sales tax. And just, again, one example from Vermont. There's a business here in Vermont that told me last week that they got their normal shipment of inventory from overseas, and they had to pay a $9 million tariff, a $9 million tariff. And they have to pay that before they take their inventory. So they have to come up with $9 million to give to the federal government if they're in a position to do it. Many small businesses in Vermont will not be in a position to do that. And then they have to float that money. They don't get that money back until they increase their prices and then sell their goods. And they have no idea if their customers are going to buy those goods at those higher prices. It's totally insane. The last thing I want to mention about the economy that I'm worried about is that Vermont is number 4 in the country over the last 15 years in terms of the amount of reimbursement that has come from FEMA for natural disasters. We don't have the natural disasters that are billions and billions of dollars that are on the news for weeks on end, but we are significantly impacted by flooding and other natural disasters here in Vermont. And again, on a per capita basis, we're in the top 5 in terms of all of the states that have gotten reimbursement over the last 15 years. There's a lot of discretion, particularly with the president, to declare a major disaster declaration. So it's something that we're highly concerned about at the state. So these are all things that I'm mad about, but just in closing, the thing that I'm really, really mad, it has nothing to do with the economy, and those things are terrible. It's this evasion and this erosion of our civil liberties that we're seeing, like the individual. The individual that was taken in Colchester on Monday, no articulated, thank you, yeah, free. There's no articulated reason for why he has been taken. There was confusion about where he was. He's a Vermont resident, and it's emblematic of a number of individuals that have had their due process and civil liberties stripped from them from this administration. And why I'm so mad is it's so anti-American values. It's anti-Vermont values. It's not who we are as a country. And the thing that also makes me mad is the amount of glee and joy that the president and his administration seems to get from doing these horrible, horrific things to people living in the United States. So that we all need to speak up about. That we can't be silent about, because the moment one individual living in this country has their rights eliminated or limited in some way, all of us have that threat of having our own rights eliminated or eliminated in some way. So being here today is one of those things we can do to step out and make sure our voices are heard, and we are not going to say this is okay, because quite frankly, it's wrong. It's wrong for so many reasons, and Vermonters are not going to accept that. So thank you for having me here today, and look forward to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Treasurer Pieciak. We're going to have Representative Robin Scheid come up and take my seat and tell you a little bit about the state budget situation.
I don't think I've ever been on stage here before. I've been in those seats. Good morning. Thank you all. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Town Hall Theater. all of our esteemed guests, and thank you all for your engagement and care about all of this. It is an honor to be here. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of what we're trying to do in the legislature, and particularly in my committee. As we said, I chair the House Appropriations Committee. This is where the budget for the state begins. As you've heard, it's close to a $9 billion budget, and over 36% or $3.1 billion of that budget is in federal funds. As Mike said already, Medicaid is about 50% of that. Over $1.5 billion is Medicaid. We have hundreds of programs that affect almost all Vermonters in some way or another, programs and services that affect food, affect people's heating, affect their health care. It just covers a myriad of programs. So all Vermonters have the potential to be affected in some way. And this doesn't include money that comes to the state either directly to individuals in the form of SNAP benefits, food benefits, or money that goes to nonprofits. So just the state is getting that $3.1 billion. We have reserves, which we always use. We have rainy day funds and things like that. They're full, but they're only about $300 million. So even if we were to use that, we don't have the ability to backfill cuts that the federal government can make. We may be able to backfill some, but certainly not everything that may be coming down. So in my committee, we have asked nearly every agency and department across state government to give us testimony about the nature and status of the federal funds that they're responsible for in their departments. So we're asking them things such as what's the amount of federal funding you're getting? What are the programs and services? Could that program continue in a reduced capacity if your funds were cut or eliminated, or would the program have to go away because we just couldn't manage to staff it and run it? And who is harmed if this program or service is eliminated or reduced? So you can imagine they're not the most cheerful sessions that we're having with folks right now because of these questions. But what we're trying to do is learn as much as we can, because you've all seen it. We don't know what's happening. We don't know when. You heard our treasurer talk about tariffs. One day they're 10%, the next day they're 145%, then it's not. And so there's no way to predict what's going to happen. But our feeling is that we want to understand as much as we can so that if and when things happen, and we know they will, we'll be better prepared to respond. It's still going to be reactive, but we'll start from a place of knowing some things. Also, what happens when the legislature's not in session? We normally run January through the middle to this year, probably the end of May, and then we're off session. People go back to their jobs and their other lives for the rest of the year. Well, we have two committees that work in the off session and when they need to. I happen to sit on both of them. One is the Joint Fiscal Committee, and the other one is the Emergency Board. And so we have, each of those bodies have some authority to make some decisions when the legislature is not in session. The Joint Fiscal Committee has 10 members, 5 from the House and 5 from the Senate. Our purpose is to review fiscal issues and approve grants and carry out rescissions if needed in the off session. And so typically we meet 3 times a year. I'm expecting that since a lot of the activities that could happen out of Washington will happen when we're not in session, that we'll probably be meeting more often, but we don't know that yet. But I just expect that will be the case. The other organization is the Emergency Board. That consists of the 4 money chairs, so the chairs of House and Senate Appropriations, the chair of Senate Finance, and the chair of House Ways and Means, and the governor. So those are the 5 people on the Emergency Board. That E-Board is run by the governor's office, and typically we meet twice a year, once in July and once in January, to get an updated revenue forecast and see where we're heading in the revenue world, which this year could be very different. That board also has the ability to meet more often. When there was the Great Recession of 2008 and 2009, we had our economists come and give us revenue forecasts 3 or 4 times that year. With COVID, we had lots of changes because we were getting more federal funds. This time, we may have them come in and do more revenue forecasts depending upon what happens. But we have the ability to do that So those are some things that we can do in the off session. The other thing that can happen is this legislature can be called back into session. That has happened before as well. We can either call ourselves back into session or the governor can call us back into session. So those are some things that we'll be thinking about. As I've said, the more we can learn ahead of time, the better prepared we'll be to respond. It is stressful right now. It is just appalling to see what is going on, and cruelty seems to be the point, which is just unbelievable. So it's stressful. I would also say be kind to yourself, be kind to others. I think our Attorney General had a great ending when she talked about what we do as Vermonters for one another, and I think we need to keep that in mind because we are in this together and we need to keep each other strong and keep ourselves strong. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Robin. So we're going to go to some questions now. Thank you, everybody. I hope that that was helpful, hearing from each of us. And we're going to take some questions that we got in advance, and then we're going to have some time for some audience questions, too. So the first question, I know this is on a lot of people's minds, especially given what's happened over the last 10 days in Vermont, and this is directed to the Attorney General. What can we as a state do to protect residents from being illegally abducted or forcibly removed from the state? What is your office doing to proactively protect immigrants in Vermont? And can we pursue legal action against ICE agents for kidnapping or false imprisonment of legal residents, such as Mosin Madawi? And what should we as citizens do if we witness such a situation?
Okay, that is a 4-part question.
Yes, it is. Most of the questions that we got were about this. So I'll just let you know,
Okay.
maybe you could address sort of broadly that whole area of law.
Will you follow up if I miss a question?
Yes.
No, okay. For starters, and this is a very frustrating area, we are state leaders, Mike and Sarah and me, and immigration is a federal issue. So right off the bat, there is a great limit to what we can do. However, our work, thankfully we got a preview of this nightmare in Trump 1, and we established what's called a fair and impartial policing policy here in Vermont. So generally speaking, the immigration is a federal issue. It's federal agents who carry out the work of immigration work on the federal landscape. And we know that Donald Trump broadcasted that and forecasted that he wanted to commandeer state resources for his immigration plans. No, can't do that. We're not going to allow that to happen. And one of the reasons is because we have our fair and impartial policing policy, which literally says, it's in the statute, every agency, including the Vermont State Police, has to reflect what's in statute. You aren't going to be communicating with and helping in the immigration context. Your job is public safety here in Vermont. That is their job. We need them to be doing their job and not working on some other project that would be contrary to our statute. So right away, our fair and impartial policing policy is very helpful and has already been established. That is great. Now, that is one element, and I'm glad we did that. But what about when you are encountering this in your lives? For example, if you have mixed citizenship in your household, if you happen upon a person who is having an interaction with an immigration enforcement official, if that happens, if you feel comfortable, you can record it on your phone, and that could be used. So that's what I would do if I was experiencing that, is I would get out my phone and I would record what I'm seeing. We have a number of wonderful agencies and nonprofits here in Vermont, but the one that I refer people to regularly is the Vermont Asylum Assistance Project. They are great and they have a ton of resources. So that would be my second step, as I would immediately call the Vermont Asylum Assistance Project. And if you are feeling nervous and anxious, and I know this sounds crazy, but sometimes doing the thing makes you feel better, look up their number and put it in your wallet. And then you know, okay, I don't need to worry about this anymore because I already have the tools at my disposal. I got my phone, I got my number. I know this probably is not going to happen, but just in case, and then you can put it out of your mind. You know, you've done the things that you can do. Now, what if you have someone in your family or you're close to and you're feeling nervous? There are resources available that have a Know Your Rights. You can print out from the Vermont Medical Society, I think. You can print out a Know Your Rights card. So you print that out, you have it in your wallet, and you're ready. You know what your rights are if you have an interaction. I'm going to refer to my cheat sheet here and see if I've missed anything that we like to refer people to. The Immigration Law Resource Center has what's called a Family Preparedness Kit. So that's another resource in addition to that card that you might check out. And also our congressional offices. Now, we have wonderful congressional representation. So get their numbers as well, so you have those handy. I also wanted to address another one of the questions I didn't forget. Now, Rachel Maddow went on TV and said, I think some state attorney general is going to come up with a way to charge these immigration officials with kidnapping. And I say to you, Rachel Maddow, are you looking for a job in a state attorney general's office? Because we are hiring in Vermont. It is lovely here. But I do think that would be tricky. I'm sure people are looking into it, but I do think that would be tricky to be successful. Generally speaking, the federal government is not going to subject itself to court by a state official. That's not what we can do, unfortunately. So I don't think, I'm sure people are looking into it, and I will be delighted if I'm wrong, but that's my instinct in that, to answer that question. Did I forget any?
No, I think you got all the parts to that question.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, this next question is for our Secretary of State. And you addressed a little bit of this, or a lot of this in your opening, but there's a few parts to this question. With federal level efforts to suppress voting rights and undermine public trust in democratic institutions, students and families in Vermont are looking for reassurance. How are you working to protect access to the ballot for youth, new Americans, and underrepresented communities? And what can educators and young people do to support civic literacy and voter participation in Vermont?
I just love this question. When I became your Secretary of State, I made a commitment to civic engagement. We have now a civics program in the Secretary of State's office. During 2024, we were out tabling at fairs and festivals and ball games, registering people to vote, helping them understand the voting process, explaining to them how elections work in Vermont, because Vermont's a little different than other parts of the country. And we also created a voter guide so that when you got your November ballot, you could also look at the voter guide and find the candidate whose values most closely matched yours. Now that we are post-election cycle and we're in an interim year, we are really focused on doubling down on our engagement with schools across the state. We're hoping to launch a Kid Governor program, which will engage fifth graders. If any of you know a fifth grader or know a fifth grade teacher, please send them to us. Engaging young people in understanding how government works. We're also hoping at some point in the near future to launch a civic seal on the graduation diploma of Vermont high schools, which will allow juniors and seniors to tick off a series of activities or accomplishments that will help them earn that civic seal, which will prepare them better for being engaged citizens in a democracy. I spend a lot of time talking with school groups, either when they come to Montpelier to tour the State House or visit my office, or I go out to talk with school groups all over the state. And what I explain to these young people is that civics is not just memorizing the First Amendment and understanding the concepts of checks and balances, although those are really important things to know right now. Civics, though, at its very core, is, do you understand where the levers of power are and how to access those levers of power? And I think when you think of civics as that, you can understand why there's been a concerted push to reduce the amount of civic education going on. It's much easier to govern you people when you don't know where the levers of power are. And I happen to think that that is an affront to democracy. And so we are out there pushing, making sure that people understand that this isn't just an academic exercise. This is how you get things done. Because the point of government is to help us come together around a problem that's too big for any one person to solve on their own. So we're doing a lot of engagement with young people. We will do voter education drives and voter registration drives again in the run-up to the 2026 election. I attend every single naturalization ceremony that happens in the state of Vermont. Yay. And we have wonderful partners in the League of Women Voters who come and table and help walk people through the process of registering to vote. Because I want to be one of the first people to say, not congratulations, although many people appreciate the congratulations when they become a citizen, but I want to be there to say, welcome. Welcome and thank you for coming here with your energy and your ideas. Now register to vote. Because we need you in our democracy. And you know, these naturalization ceremonies have become increasingly poignant in this 2025 era that we're in, and in particular when we recall what happened to Mr. Madawi when he showed up for what he thought was his final interview before he was assigned to a naturalization ceremony. We are a nation of immigrants, and we need to welcome people who are coming here, who are working hard, who are chasing the American dream that we all believed was real. And we need to help them access that, help them attain their citizenship and be able to become active members of our communities. You know, the reason the SAVE Act and the executive order that came before it are really so useless, honestly. I mean, we talked about, in my opening remarks, about the very, very, very low percentage of instances of non-citizens voting. And if you think about it, and if you know someone who's living here in Vermont who's not a citizen, you'll understand why. If you came here looking for a better life, looking for the freedom and the liberty and the safety that the United States of America promises, you're probably working. Maybe you've started your own business. Maybe you're raising a family. Maybe you're sending money back home to folks that you left behind to help support them. You're not going to risk all of that for a deportable offense. And believe me, these folks know that voting when you are a non-citizen is a deportable offense. It is also an offense that can bar you from ever being able to obtain citizenship. And so the number of instances is so very low because people who came here from far away understand how to follow the rules and what they need to do to be able to become Americans. So my office is very happy to be reaching out to new citizens, to be reaching out to folks who may have trouble accessing the ballot box. But you know, the SAVE Act will essentially eliminate some of the things that we've done in Vermont that make it easy for people to participate. We have same-day voter registration in Vermont, which means that there's not an arbitrary deadline. Oops, sorry, you didn't remember to register by 3 weeks and 1 day before the election, so you don't get to vote. We eliminated that, but the SAVE Act will make it very difficult for people to be able to register to vote and vote on the same day. And so we are going to fight back against this, and we're going to fight with everything that we have because, you know, I believe in a democracy. It is the people who should be choosing and picking their leaders, and not their leaders picking who gets to vote and who gets to do the choosing. So we'll continue working on that.
Thank you, Sarah. So the next question is for Mike, and Mike, I'm going to combine two questions for you. We had a question about Social Security and what Vermont officials are doing to help people who are having trouble accessing Social Security. I know you do a lot of work with pensions, so that's why I'm directing this question at you. Apparently some other states are setting up programs to help people if they're having trouble with accessing Social Security. And then the next question is about funding for environmental work and energy work in Vermont. There were some federal legislation that provided a lot of money, and that's all going away. We passed a law that your office has been working on heavily, the Climate Superfund Act, and there's a lot of concern that we'll be going backward with our environmental work. So I'm wondering if you could address both of those things in your answer.
Yeah,
Thank you.
for sure. Well, you know, on the Social Security point, I think maybe just to level set, you know, the three big programs that people get from the federal government: Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. You know, I think the first thing to sort of point out is with Medicare and Social Security, you know, these are programs that people have worked their entire lives and paid into, and now you're simply getting the benefit of that bargain. You're getting your Social Security, you're getting your Medicare. So these are things that are owed to Americans, owed to Vermonters. So I think that has to be the framework that we think about this. So Social Security is not something that is in the Republicans' budget to cut. We talked about Medicaid and how that is, but what they appeared to do is wanting to put up roadblocks to individuals to be able to access their Social Security. So at the same time that they have made a proposal that you no longer can call into Social Security to set up your Social Security when you're turning 65 or 62 or whenever you're going to take it, or if you need to change your direct deposit, that you need to either go online to their system or you need to go in person to a Social Security office. But at the same time they're announcing that policy, they're also announcing their desire to close federal offices, including Social Security offices, all across the country. There was an announcement in Vermont that the Montpelier Social Security office would be closed, for example. That was something announced a couple of months ago. So if that comes to fruition and this policy is implemented, then if you're in Essex County or Orleans County, St. Johnsbury, and you need to change your Social Security direct deposit for some reason, they're expecting you to drive all the way to South Burlington, hours of your time, hundreds of miles, lots of money for gas. Many individuals can't drive. They're not independent in terms of being able to get out of the house. So that is going to put a barrier, and an unnecessary barrier. The federal government should be helping you get the thing that you're deserved, not trying to put up roadblocks and barriers. So the things that I know that other states have done on Social Security, and it really kind of ties into Charity's work, is that they've put up websites wanting people to come in and report their challenges that they've had accessing their Social Security, so that those examples can be used in legal actions against the federal government for what they're doing. Now in Vermont, we run the pension systems. There's 60,000 Vermonters that in some way are touched by these pension systems: teachers, state employees, municipal workers. And similarly, they've paid in through their entire lives of work, and now they're owed this pension benefit. And we want to make sure that's accessible for them. So we allow people to obviously have an online system. We allow them to come in person, like the federal government's talking about. We also allow people to change their information through fax or through mail or through email. Any way that we can make it so that you access your benefit or change your benefit in a safe and secure way, that's what our focus is, because we want Vermonters to get their benefits. Now, what could Vermont do? And I think we should be thinking about this. You know, the two things that they're trying to do to cut down on your ability to get your benefit: the technology, like individuals may not know how to access that website or how to maneuver on it. So we can provide training and knowledge for the website, so individuals have more comfort and familiarity. But we also know there's not internet across the entire state of Vermont. So there's other nonprofits that provide services to older Vermonters around health and wellness and the like, and trying to incorporate some of those programs so individuals can get to a Social Security office, I think will be critical. So I think we have more work to do on that, but I think that's the big focus for us. And then the other one on the environment, you know, this is a really challenging issue, because we are confronted in the here and now with an existential crisis of our democracy, of our values, of what's going to happen to this country. But at the same time, we have this other existential threat that is bearing down on Vermont and on the world, which is climate change and the impacts that we're seeing from a changing climate. I mentioned how much FEMA reimbursement we have in the state of Vermont, and that's a real issue. And this is something that's going to remain after Trump is out of office and is long gone. So our challenge is, how do we confront the crisis that's in our face at the moment while not losing sight of this other crisis that is happening and will continue to happen to us and to the entire world for decades and decades to come. Ruth mentioned monies that were available under the Biden administration, particularly this bill called the IRA. We set up a number of roundtables as our treasurer's office to talk to a lot of organizations about how are we going to access all this money. We need to make sure we're getting every single penny and making sure we put it to good use here in Vermont. And then after the inauguration, after the election, really most of that just froze up, and really sadly so, because there were some really good programs that would put a lot of money toward tackling our CO2 emissions and making sure we could have a healthier, safer planet. But what do? I mean, one thing we're continuing to work on, because we know it's going to continue to happen to us, is how do we build resiliency in Vermont from climate change? How do we make sure our towns are safer from flooding? How do we make sure our buildings are safer from flooding? And that's something our office is working on with the administration, to create a climate resiliency strategy that we will announce this summer that shows a path forward to how do we invest, what are the projects, what are the priorities, and then what are the funding sources as well. So that work needs to continue even in light of all this wildness that's going on. And then in terms of the Superfund, you know, I don't guess Charity and I weren't mentioned in the Superfund, but Vermont was, in terms of the executive order that the president signed a week or so ago that called out Vermont and New York for engaging in this activity, which is simply trying to say the fossil fuel companies caused this problem, so they should be the ones responsible for helping fix this problem. It's as simple as that, this climate Superfund. And the president has issued a directive to have his entire administration and Justice Department look at whether or not there needs to be actions taken by them against these states that are trying to simply hold big oil accountable for the damage that they have caused. And unfortunately, Earth Day is next Tuesday. That's not the unfortunate part. The unfortunate part is that the administration is planning actions on Earth Day that would target green organizations and take away their tax-exempt status. They're targeting, asking the IRS to look at removing the tax-deductible ability for individuals that donate to climate-related groups. And they're looking at designating individuals that try to disrupt fossil fuel production as being designated in some way as a terrorist activity, because it is hurting the independence, I suppose, of the United States in terms of being energy independent. So this is something that we are anticipating happening on Tuesday, on Earth Day. So the environment is clearly under threat, not just by what we have done as individuals on this earth, but clearly under threat by this administration. And we need to keep it in our front of our minds. But of course, we have these other challenges that are so immediate that we need to respond to. So we have to be able to handle both and make progress.
Yeah.
Ruth,
Thanks,
can I
Mike.
just layer on some of the work that my
Yeah.
office is doing? I
Go
just
ahead.
wanted to update folks. So we very recently signed on to an amicus brief relating to the Social Security Administration. So you can find that if you want to read it on our website. And with regards to the Climate Superfund Act, what we've seen Donald Trump do, especially, well, this is widespread, is he will write an executive order that doesn't actually do anything other than what Mike described. It tells a subordinate, hey, can you write me a memo? It's basically an email in the form of an executive order, and because he wants to feel important. So keep that in mind when you are getting flooded with this feeling of all this bad stuff. Like a lot of it is just words that don't do anything. And also, when it comes to the environment, remember that during the first Trump administration, we sued 62 times. Half of those were about the environment, and we won 60 times. In some fashion, we won, right? And the reason why is because he keeps doing the same thing. Instead of doing this the proper way, using the people in Congress who are of his party to pass legislation, he is trying to do this the illegal way. So it's to our benefit that he's not super competent and doesn't like the rules, because the judiciary does like the rules. That's what we're finding. And so just keep that in mind when this is a concern for you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike and Charity. I do also want to add, I said I served on the Natural Resources Committee, and each of the committees gets to make recommendations to our Appropriations Committee on what to fund, and then the Appropriations Committee does the hard work of sorting through all the recommendations and trying to figure out. But the Senate Natural Resources Committee voted on Friday to provide funding to Mike's office to do the work that they need to do to prepare for the Climate Superfund action that needs to be taken. We also recommended providing funding to the Agency of Natural Resources for an additional lawyer because we're being sued. So we are trying, and like Mike said, and like Robin knows all too well, we have a lot of really immediate needs. I'm not sure what will end up happening in the budget, but we are trying to take care of the long term and the short term at the same time through our work in the legislature. We're going to do one more question from this, and then I'm going to go to the audience. So if you want to think about what questions, we're going to have two people with mics going and coming to you. So think about your question, and then after we take this last one, raise your hand, and either Jason or Bass will come to you with a microphone, so you do not have to leave your seat and come down here. We don't want people falling or running into each other. So just think about it, and we'll take as many as we can before Lisa kicks us out. So the last question, and try as quickly as possible. I know this is a big question, though, which is we've gotten a lot of questions about Medicaid and how we're going to handle continuing access to health care if we do see the major Medicaid cuts that are being promised right now. And so I'm going to ask Rep. Shai to take that one.
We could spend all day on this conversation about Medicaid. We did have the Medicaid director come into our committee and give us a presentation, which is on the House Appropriations Committee website. I can share that with you offline to give you more details. There are many, many programs. We don't know what's going to hit. I think in a big picture area, they could change match rates, and in other words, how much they give us and then how much the state is responsible for. That could cost us hundreds of millions of dollars if they reduce what the federal match is going to be versus what we have to pay. They're also looking at narrowing eligibility of who is eligible to, for certain Medicaid programs, which would mean fewer people getting the services that they need. We've already heard about them canceling LIHEAP, which is the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, which is a huge program. And the interesting thing is that we think of the northern states, but in the summer, the southern states need it for cooling. So everybody needs that program. They've also talked about cutting, and I don't know if they've actually done this yet or not, eliminating Head Start, one of the most successful programs that we have in this country. They're clearly not doing this in any sort of thoughtful way to weed out inefficient programs, or they wouldn't be touching Head Start. Those are a couple of things. We have some special programs that we're doing investments in things that are specific to the state that I won't go into, that if they cut those would be really difficult. They also are looking at what they're going to reduce for TANF, temporary assistance to needy families. Are they going to be changing or reducing SNAP benefits? A lot of that goes to individuals. People get their EBT card every month. They get their what we call food stamps every month. There's some that goes through the state, but individuals may be affected that doesn't come through the state. So this is a big deal, obviously. Healthcare is a big deal. At the same time that all this is happening, the healthcare system in the state of Vermont is very fragile. You've heard Don George, who's the CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield, talk about what's happening there. We are very worried about that. I'm in meetings every week about our Vermont healthcare system. That is over and above what's happening at the federal government. And healthcare is like the affordability issue we have in this state. Our governor talks about affordability. I've talked to him personally. He has chosen not to address healthcare. He won't come to the meetings. He does not want to talk about healthcare. So you could call the governor's office.
828-3333.
Thank you. Yes. Call the governor's office and tell them you want him to start tackling health care. That would be really great. I could go on. I will stop there. Yeah.
Thank you, Robin, very much.
Bass
Raise
has
your
someone
hand,
right here.
and Bass, there are a couple. Oh, Bass has one right here. So, hi, Lois, go ahead.
First of all, I want to thank you, Ruth, for organizing this, and I hope all of you run for re-election. I guess my big question that I don't think anybody really talked about was education. And where do you see this going? This multiple school districts, and what is going to be the effect on small towns, small schools?
Okay, thank you for that question, Lois. So I serve on the Senate Finance Committee, which has jurisdiction over education finance issues. So just really briefly, this is not a federal related question, so I'm just going to be brief on this, and then I can talk to you further. And like I said, I'm happy to do a forum just on the whole education stuff, if somebody will help me organize it. The House passed a comprehensive bill that's an education transformation bill that would create larger school districts after there is a process to do so. It would change our funding formula to what's called a foundation formula, and it would increase our education standards. So it would improve quality, it would stabilize the financing system, and it would create larger, hopefully more efficient and more opportunity-driven school districts. It is not finished yet. We just got the bill this week in the Senate, so there's still more work to do. And it would, as the House laid it out, it would roll in over 5 years, so it wouldn't be immediate. The governor's proposal was much more quick and created much, much larger districts and had a formula that was much less appropriate, let's just say. But there's still work to do, and again, I'm happy to come back to this issue because it's not directly, it is indirectly. There's certainly education issues that are happening at the federal level, but in terms of the transformation plan, that is a state initiative, so it's sort of a more to come later in another forum. So thank you. Jason has someone over here. And if you could state your name and where you're from, that would be helpful. The mic is not on, Mary.
Ooh, now it's on.
It's on now.
Okay.
My name is Mike Kellogg from here in Middlebury, and my question is really for the Attorney General. With the Supreme Court having virtually given Trump a get-out-of-jail-free card for anything that he does in his capacity of the presidency, and the fact that he has the ability to pardon virtually anybody, how do we address those particular issues when his minions carry out his wishes that we believe are not legal or certainly morally right? What can the states do to counteract that, or do we have a misinterpretation of this, what I call the get-out-of-jail-free card that he's been given?
It's a tricky area because it's virtually unprecedented. So we kind of have to navigate our way through. But you know, we have our system of democracy. It involves the judiciary, and that's where we will continue to go, is the courts. And ultimately, the courts, and we know it goes up to the Supreme Court, and really they will be doing their job. And you're right that they also are the ones who gave Trump this get-out-of-jail-free card, as you say, but it's individual lawyers who appear in court. And so all of these misdeeds that have been talked about today will have to be carried out in court by lawyers who are willing to they might be pardoned if they are, held criminally in contempt in a federal court, but they're going to lose their license. Donald Trump has no control over that. So we have to find all the lawyers who are willing to sacrifice themselves for these nefarious plans. And so far, we haven't seen the kind of widespread disregard for courts that I think many of us have feared. And so we have to keep that in mind as well. But I will also point something out. The Congress is up every 2 years, and the midterms are just around the corner. And I'm predicting that if we work hard and fight hard, we will take back the House in the midterms. And that will change things just like last time it changed things in 2018 when that happened. And one of the reasons why you're showing up today, you're protesting, you're rallying, makes an impact because it shows the members of Congress who are up for re-election next year that people are not happy and that they are being impacted. At some point, they have a role too, the legislative branch, and they will have to do their job. And I truly believe that this process is on that path where Congress is either going to do the right thing or they're going to lose their seats. Not our beloved Congresswoman Becca Balint, but outside of Vermont, the people who aren't doing the right thing. So that's why it's important to, you're not, your role is not small. Making your voice heard is not small, and we should keep at it and keep expressing if you are angry, if you are upset, if you have a different view of democracy than this administration, express it, because it does make an impact.
Thank you. And I do just want to add that I did invite Congresswoman Balint to come today, and she was not able to. She's in Washington, D.C., but she is fighting the good fight and hopefully will attract other people to run for Congress and help us win back the House in 26. So we have a question here.
My name is Beth Davis. Excuse me, I'm from Shoreham. And this question is actually for Robin.
All right, come on back, Robin.
On behalf of the individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, I would like to know what impact the Medicaid cuts will have for people who get services, especially help with their daily needs from the home and community-based waiver services.
That's a thing. Okay, yeah. Thanks, Beth. An important question, important issue. The individuals with disabilities are served from a number of ways. We have organizations outside of the state of Vermont, as well as the Department of Dale for Disabilities, Aging, and Independent Living is also working. We don't know what's going to happen, so I don't know how to respond, but it's on our radar. And I can tell you that in our budget itself, from a state perspective, we have been funding homes and services with state dollars. So there will still be things that are happening, and it will be part of the response that we have. It's going to be part of a fuller response depending upon what happens with the state, so with the federal government. So we are definitely paying attention to it as something that's of concern to us as well. And I wish I had more information for you, but we just don't know what they're doing. As we've all said, from day to day, we have no idea what they're doing, and then they throw things at the wall, and some stick and some don't. It's sort of the bully. If you fight back, sometimes they go away, and sometimes they don't. So, but it's on our radar.
Can I weigh in on some of our lawsuits? We have sued a number of times based on a freezing of funds, and of course, Congress is responsible under the Constitution for spending the taxpayers' money. And so Donald Trump, if he wants to do that, he should run for Congress. Instead, he ran for president. That's a different job. And the courts aren't taking kindly to his viewpoint. We keep winning. So I just wanted to provide that perspective to the extent that we are nervous and anxious. So far, we've been very successful at pointing out you can't decide unilaterally. Now, I'm worried he's going to listen and realize, oh, it's Congress. I should just tell them to do what I want. They're all Republicans in charge. But so far, he hasn't. And it's the first one we sued was the second case. I mean, we've had a few. So it's been appealed, and it's in the First Circuit waiting. So we'll see what they have to say. But I just wanted, you can watch those cases to see what happens.
Can I mention one thing to Beth's question too? You know, Robin's right, like we don't know what's going to happen, but Republicans in Congress have said we want $880 billion cut from Medicaid. That's their budget. That'd be $2 billion over the next 10 years from Vermont, $200 million every single year. So Robin mentioned $105 billion coming to Vermont, $105 billion coming to Vermont, potentially $200 million being cut. We don't know how it would be cut. But if you do think of all the individuals on Medicaid, the group that you're talking about are some of the most vulnerable. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of comfort in terms of, like, it's a little comfort because there are people that are going to be impacted, but of the most vulnerable within that group, there is still sufficient resources, you would think, to protect them. The thing that I also worry about, because you mentioned the waiver piece, and almost all of Vermont's Medicaid dollars are in a waiver. That's the federal government telling us we can spend our money differently than the way they prescribe because we're doing something innovative or something that benefits our community. And that, if that went away, if the waiver was those waivers were canceled, that would be a significant issue separate from the funding that may be cut. So that's something else that we have to have on our radar and be of great concern and importance.
This is a question, I believe, for the Attorney General. It's a very specific question about what is the current status of that federally allocated money in the Inflation Reduction Act for green energy projects. I ask from the point of view of houses of worship, but I believe my question would apply to any business or nonprofit. I'm head of a task force trying to get all the churches in our state to zero fossil fuel by 2034, and what faith leaders across the country have told me is, well, you just have to tell people we can't count on it. It's chaos. So can you tell me where it stands and what we should be telling people about this money that was congressionally approved? Because we're just paralyzed and don't know what to do.
I don't know a lot about that, although, like I said, when Congress decides how to spend money, ultimately it would be a lawsuit. So that's would be what I would do. Now, if money is coming directly to an organization, it wouldn't be the state who would sue, it would be that organization. What I have experienced when I've connected organizations with lawyers is that lawyers are eager to help. So they have been open to taking pro bono cases or low bono cases at a discounted rate to help individual nonprofits and organizations if they need to, because they're being deprived of a right and the Constitution has been violated.
Do you know, Mike?
Yes.
But have we sued? Has Vermont sued because of monies withheld that were federally mandated? Have we just in general sued about it, I guess, is my question.
Yes, several times. We have the NIH lawsuit. Millions of dollars was supposed to go to the University of Vermont. That was blocked. The federal funding freeze through the OMB memo, remember that? It seems so long ago, but it was only a couple of months ago. Those both have been blocked, and they've been appealed by the federal government, and they're in the circuit courts. So the next layer, after whoever happens there, will be appealed to the Supreme Court. So, and I think there's more that I'm not thinking of right now either. We have a few.
And just on that point, under the IRA, because prior to the IRA, if you were a for-profit business, you could get tax credits for having solar projects and such. But the issue was that organizations like yours that are nonprofits or municipalities, like they have a lot of solar projects or a lot of energy projects that they want to do, and they had to go through this convoluted way of getting the benefit. And the IRA said you can get the tax credit directly. You don't have to have this convoluted financial structure. That is something that is in the IRA as a law. So it's something that continues to exist. It wasn't money that was put away. It wasn't money that was appropriated. It just simply would have been a tax credit for now nonprofits and municipalities. The town of Charlotte, I think, was the first in Vermont to take advantage of that, financing through the Vermont Bond Bank, and they were able to put solar on their new town garage. So that, like Charity said, you don't know what they're going to do or what kind of levers they're going to pull, but it's something that would take an act of Congress to undo. So the president themselves could try to slow it down, but your organization should continue to be in a good position to access those projects and those tax credits.
Okay, we're going to take, I know I see a lot of hands. We're going to have one more question, and then we're going to wrap up. And I can stay a little bit longer. I don't know if others can, if you want to talk after, but we have the hall until 11:30, so unfortunately we only have time for one more question over here.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you all for coming and being honest with us. It's really important. I'm worried about every single thing that people have brought up here. I'm worried more broadly about the nonprofit sector and the services that are provided directly with federal money that don't come through the state. For example, the rental assistance program, if it's cut, like they're saying it will be, but who knows when, then thousands of people across this country, thousands, will be homeless. And we aren't prepared in this country for the nonprofit sector to be sustainable in any other way than philanthropy. And philanthropy cannot take the place of the federal government. It was never meant to, and if they additionally take away the 501c3 status, we are effed, if you know what I'm saying. So I would love to be hearing about a discussion at the state level of the broader picture of how nonprofits should and could be buffered against the cuts in services with federal dollars. I don't expect the state can pick up the bill everywhere, but if we have a bunch more people losing their housing, all the other systems are going to fall apart as well. So I'd love to know the prioritizing of what services are important. Health is important, housing is important. We are in a mess. It takes a long time to rebuild what is broken apart. We know that. So I'm looking at 5 years from now, actually. I know that we can't get the Congress reconstituted in our favor for another year and 9 months. That's a long time. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the prioritization is happening as much as possible. I mean, Rep. Scheid talked a lot about what the Appropriations Committee is doing. They're cataloging, and our joint fiscal office is cataloging all of the federal reductions that are either already we know are happening or might be happening, and trying to buffer as much as possible. I also have a colleague in the legislature who is cataloging as much as possible all of the cuts that nonprofit organizations are expecting, and trying to figure out how much that will entail. There is no way that the state is going to be able to afford to fill in all of the gaps of the federal losses, both to state programs and to community-based programs that our nonprofit organizations fund. So I think over the next few years, as we see the implications and where these cuts actually happen, the legislature and the state government in general will have to do a lot of prioritizing. Thankfully, here in Vermont, for the most part, we understand about the separation of powers, and that the legislature has the power of the purse, and so that we are trying to do as much as possible in our budgeting and in our policy making to do those priorities. And it's not easy, especially when we don't have full information yet. All right, everybody. I want to first thank all of you for coming and spending your morning with us. I know your time is precious, and it's been really wonderful. And I forgot to mention this at the beginning. I wonder how many of you might happen to be from Shoreham in the room. Raise your hands high, you Shoreham-ers, because the idea for this forum actually came from the Shoreham town meeting. I traveled to 9 town meetings on town meeting day, and at the Shoreham town meeting, the topic of conversation when I was there was about the federal situation. There was a federal employee, there were a number of teachers, there were some farmers, there were some nonprofit workers, and they were all very concerned about the federal situation. They asked me, what can I do? I said, remember, I'm a state legislator, not a federal legislator, so there's not a lot I can do directly. Obviously, there's a lot of indirect stuff we're all trying to do. And somebody said, well, could you do a forum? And I said, well, I can try. So this is that forum. And so I just want to say thank you to everybody from Shoreham for that wonderful conversation, and to just know that I I do listen, and I try to do what my constituents ask me to do, and I am thrilled by this turnout, and thank you so much, Sarah and Charity and Mike and Robin, for your participation. Thanks again to the Town Hall Theater and Lisa and her entire crew, and to MCTV and their live streaming up there, and the Addison Independent is here as well, and if you all want to have one last 10-second thank you, that would be great, but thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. And I will try to follow up with some resources for everyone, too. Thank you.